I think, my life certainly over the last 10 years proves that I'm not an acceptor of the official story just because it's the official story. By the way, of course, it goes without saying that I would never, after 35 years of doing this, ever accept the first explanation from anyone. And I mean literally from anyone. Violence is a huge component of it. You don't want it to become a bigger component of it.
Tucker Carlson just went on Megyn Kelly's podcast to articulate his biggest fear concerning Charlie Kirk's assassination and the response to it. He also shares his take on who he thinks is culpable and what the pulse of the country is right now and where we go forward in terms of cultural and political angles. So let's get his take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Where are you at right now, less than 24 hours later?
Well, I mean, of course, bewildered. I got back last night and stayed up until probably like everybody until 1 a.m, talking to people and texting people. And then, on X, looking at the reaction. And I woke up this morning and I thought to myself, that's really not the way at all, to sit and marinate in the hate. Which I did. I couldn't help it. It's like pornography or snuff videos or something. You're just like mesmerized by it. It's like watching, a tragedy over and over. Not the violence, but the hate. I mean, I must have watched 15 videos of young women celebrating Charlie's death. And my first thought was, well, this is obviously some kind of, manufactured attempt to divide the country against itself. And it's probably all fake. And then you look and it's actually not fake. Here's a teacher from an elementary school in Idaho, and here's a yoga instructor from West Hollywood, and these are like real people with real names. And then you realize, boy, I mean, the depth of evil out there is really overwhelming. Like, what country? What do I know the country? Do I know who lives here? Like, what is this? And I was just, I couldn't turn away. And then I realized when I woke up this morning, that's really hurting me. And I woke up to a group text from my wife. To our family text. Of course, everyone knew Charlie. He was just at our house, and very upset for a bunch of different reasons. And she sent Luke 6, which is like the most radical thing that anyone's ever said. And it's like, no, love your enemies, pray for your persecutors. When someone assaults you, don't fight back. Which is impossible, of course. I mean, no one can do that, and it literally takes supernatural intervention for anyone to live that way, much less to feel that way. And that,
man, I really admire Tucker's humility. Regardless of what you think about his political takes, his humility is incredible. And yeah, I had to agree with him. There's been a lot of hate that's just spewed out there on this. And I'll tell you, if you're, a liberal that is reveling in the murder and the assassination of Charlie Kirk, whatever you think of him, I have my own disagreements with him. They're immaterial because it's unjustified. And if you want to bring about a right-wing form of reactionary totalitarianism, keep doing that. Keep endorsing Charlie's death, his murder, this senseless murder, and keep talking about transing children while you're at it, by the way, because that is what's going to bring about a right-wing flavor of totalitarianism that's about 100 times worse than what you could possibly imagine. And this version of the right now will be far worse 10 years in the future if that's the road you want to pave. So yeah, this hate is unconscionable. And that is what is going to drive a lot of these calls from right-wingers to establish political suppression and a new censorship regime and taking aim at the left in general for the deeds of this madman that murdered Charlie Kirk.
That's what's called for, is supernatural intervention. I mean, you can take all kinds of steps. We do need to restore order in the country, and no one's kind of done that for the last 50 years. And this is the end result of true disorder. And by order, by the way, that doesn't mean authoritarian behavior or limiting people's constitutional rights or races. There's nothing like that. I mean, order is the key to happiness and peace. Order is what God creates out of chaos at the beginning of Genesis. Like, order is a prerequisite for joy. So we need order. We don't have it. I hope it's restored. But much more deeply, people need to be transformed and see each other as God sees them, including their enemies, as human beings who are doing bad things but are still created by God. Like, without that worldview, then you descend into hell. In fact, you already live there, which is where, in some sense, we live now. And
yeah, I got to mostly agree. I think totalitarian order is a bad thing. Tyrannical order is a bad thing. And, just unmitigated chaos is a bad thing too. You know, there has to be an amalgamation of the two. But the most important thing too, rather than adhering to those kind of abstractions or favoring the one or the other in terms of political discourse and the culture, is you want a society that protects individual rights, individual liberties, you know, respects due process, doesn't launch endless wars, doesn't fleece the populace of its wealth, impose inflation through the central banks. That's what we want. You know, whether you call that order or chaos, that is what we want.
Boy, that just became clear because it happened to me. I mean, I was sitting there fuming and despair and like, by the way, what was this? You know, there's always a lot going on in the backdrop, a lot. And I don't know, of course, the answer. But everyone's got an opinion on that, and it really took me away from Charlie, Erica, and their children, and the things that you should be meditating on and praying about. You know, it totally took me out of that. I got a call about an hour ago from one of the very few people I trust in Washington and really love, and like a true friend, who said, "I bet, like everybody, you're tempted to go to dark places or focus on, you know, the violence here or what was clearly a well-planned assassination, and you should just take a break from that." And this is someone who I agree with on everything. It's not, you know, this wasn't trying to control me, but just like out of concern for, you know, me as a person, like you should focus on Charlie and who he was and, you know, proceed with wisdom and restraint. And so that's all I'm gonna say. I mean, of course, you can imagine all kinds of things, and I don't think anything is necessarily implausible. I do think that we should always, and I try to live by this, be skeptical of everything that we're presented as a pat explanation for anything. I mean, of course, you know.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even have all the facts about this, but where I'm with Tucker the most and what he just said there is to think about this guy being deprived of his family, and more so now, his family being deprived of him. Those two young children will never grow up remembering their father, and that's just total robbery. So this supervillain that shot Charlie Kirk while he was out there speaking and he was going to engage in discourse, open discourse, free speech that he did champion, despite whatever else you have to say about him, good or bad, and they robbed this family, this poor family of this man. And it's just so senseless. And it is easy to go to dark places. If you're a friend of Charlie's, it would be tempting to lash out. And especially after seeing these videos, reveling in his death, celebrating it, it's just vile and reprehensible. It has to be rejected everywhere. Those people have to be set in place for the vile nature of their response, if that's their nature. And in the same time, on the right, you know, sticking it to the left and imposing collective punishment against a whole swath of the populace is not the way to go here too. So there are two directions through which this can go haywire, and our society needs to avert those catastrophes from both directions.
There's an awful lot of deception in this world, but we shouldn't allow, you know, the potential that what we're hearing is fake to convince us that it is fake before we know that it's fake. In other words, wait for the facts. But I mean, of course, it goes without saying that I would never, after, 35 years of doing this, ever accept the first explanation from anyone. And I mean, literally from anyone. So, so we'll find out. But clearly, the way that it was done with maximum violence with a 30-06, not a 223, by the way.
I don't know guns. What does that mean?
Okay, so at the 223, the 5.56, the AR-15 round, the little 22 caliber high pressure round that is, thought to be the most dangerous gun in the world and weapon of war and all this stuff, you're constantly hearing about it, is in fact designed basically to wound under most circumstances. The gun that murdered Charlie was what is often referred to by Chuck Schumer as a deer rifle. But of course, it's a much larger round. It is, in fact, an old-fashioned military round. It's 30-06, 30 caliber, big round. And that, people who understand guns, I mean, I guess all I'm saying without getting sidetracked is, whoever contemplated this and pulled it off and committed the murder, had thought about it and was clearly, I'm not saying it was, I don't know who it was, but it wasn't clearly not some random guy who got mad yesterday morning and decided to do it. Obviously.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it seems so. We don't have all the facts yet. It seems like so far from what we know, it's probably a single shooter. The authorities have released video of him. There's a manhunt going on. 2 people that were arrested were released. It's hard to know the motivations. Some people hypothesize that he had carvings and rounds of, representing the trans agenda or something. I'm going to hold off on talking about that until we know more. A lot of other people have hypothesized that this is a deep state plot to kill him. Who knows? I'm not just taking everything on face value. I'm waiting for facts to flow in, and I've only been speaking on things that I feel passionate about in terms of the response so far. I'm going to keep it to that for now. You might see more coverage of that in the future, but that's the most responsible thing. And as Tucker said, always be skeptical. Follow the money, seek the truth, be skeptical of the orthodox accounts if they don't comport to what you're actually seeing with your own 2 eyes. And we'll have to see.
Agree with that.
There was great forethought in this. So that's all we know of. Again, I think, my life certainly over the last 10 years proves that I'm not an acceptor of the official story just because it's the official story. By the way, the official story can be right. Just because it's the official story doesn't mean it's a lie. But I think
there can also be more to the official story.
Well, that's true. And
yeah, this is a healthy attitude. Just look back, 25 years. Iraq war, war on terror, COVID regime. You got Russiagate. You got all of these events where propaganda filled our television sets and was funneled in to the American public to try to steer our minds and guide us into directions that are counterintuitive to us but beneficial to the state. That's how it usually occurs. So it is healthy to always question those narratives and always question the official story. Look at what they're selling us about the Epstein case now. That this was a Democratic hoax, that it's boring, that there's nothing to see here. That Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene standing alongside the victims, they're not going to bring you truth. We're going to bring you truth through our cover up here. It's so absurd every time they feed you this nonsense.
Part of the problem with living to 56 is you've seen so much, and I grew up around a lot of this stuff already, that you can just get lost in it, completely lost in it, because a lot of things over time that are, the truth about some things. You don't know the truth. I don't know the truth about everything. That's for sure. There are many more things I'm ignorant on that I'm knowledgeable about. However, I've seen enough and been into enough dinners where people are like, well, da-da-da-da-da, and you're thinking to yourself, you have no idea what actually happened. And you can get into a kind of mindset. We need radical transparency, just what I've been saying for years. But I do think we also need to be mindful that we are in a form of civil war right now. That's obvious. Violence is a huge component of it. You don't want it to become a bigger component of it. And
so I think it's wrong to characterize what we're in as a civil war, and it's even more unhealthy after a tragedy like this. I don't know if that's really, it doesn't seem like that's Tucker's intention, but portraying this as, an existential war between different factions and different segments of the populace is the worst thing you can do right now. To pit people against each other and take advantage of this tragedy to expand the powers of government and things where that can lead is horrific. But he did say also there, and I agree with this part, violence is a part of our discourse in society, and that's naturally going to manifest when violence is such a part of U.S. foreign policy, by the way, that it will manifest domestically. And as part of our drug war, very violent, things are the ramifications of that. And when you kill so many people overseas, it just becomes normalized. And that becomes part of our political system. That was the truth during Vietnam, too. You saw, the civil rights era, the disastrous violence that occurred there, the Weather Underground that followed that into the early 70s, the Symbionese Liberation Army and Patty Hearst. All those things, spilled into just this nonsensical, violent political behavior that we do not want to see repeated now. That's the last thing we want. So yeah, violence needs to be less part of it.
What's the answer to that? And I've just been around a couple wars and I don't want that. And I certainly don't want it here. There are really no winners, and its effects last for generations, centuries, really. And so what is the answer? And the answer is to see one another as God sees us. It doesn't mean to excuse inexcusable behavior. It doesn't mean moral relativism. It means exactly the opposite of moral relativism. It means recognizing that we are created by a creator, all of us, no matter what our views or our appearance, all of us, and proceed with that in mind always. It doesn't mean excusing, murder or anything else.
I don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree with him. Throw the book at the murderer, by the way, but don't try this collective culpability in assigning and ascribing the blame for this to the left. That'll be so tempting. It's already been done by swaths of the right now. I've seen people like Christopher Rufo and Alex Jones doing that sort of thing. I think it's totally unhealthy. It is stoking the flames of a fire that we don't want to burn out of control. It's throwing gasoline on a potential proverbial fire that's going on right now that could, just sink our society into this, us versus them mentality, when it's not us versus them as it should be toward the people in power, curtailing our rights, plunging us into wars, adding immense amounts of debt. They're pitting people against each other, some of which are neighbors. That's not what we want after situations like this. It will only spell disaster.
I worry about whether this is a tipping point, a turning point, sure, for the country in a negative way. That this could be a descent into something, this could be the beginning of a descent into something even darker, right? As opposed to a period at the end of some terrible things that have been happening. What do you see?
I just want to repeat, I've gotten hundreds, of course, of texts, and they're all the same. I'm so sorry. I know you were close to him. Be safe. And I appreciate every single one. I've responded with gratitude to every one. But the one that stands out among the hundreds and hundreds I've received comes from my cousin Jake, who's one of the wisest people I know. And he said, I'm not praying for your safety. I'm praying that you would more fervently seek wisdom than ever before. That just stuck out to me right there. It's seek wisdom more than ever before, fervently. That's what we need to do. You can't protect yourself you should be reasonable, of course. I'm not preaching recklessness, but I'm saying the goal is wisdom. Seek wisdom. And you go through these texts and that one, that's the truth right there.
Yeah, I gotta agree with them there. The best way to seek wisdom is to seek the truth. Follow the money, use your own senses, use reason to deduce the disinformation from the truth. That's what we all need to do in every situation, not just related to Charlie Kirk's death. But I think that goes back to a lesson from the Bible. Solomon, one of the most wise people of his time, if not the most wise, prayed for wisdom. God said, I'll give you any prayer that you want. And he said, I'm going to pray for wisdom. And he had shortcomings, by the way. But wisdom is something we should all strive for, especially in times like this. These times are not without parallel. It's not a one-to-one comparison, but the assassination of Martin Luther King, someone also that was very influential in his time, that sparked riots, and that sparked a lot of violent behavior to follow in the years to follow that did lead to, in some ways, the Weather Underground, and some of the civil rights movement spiraled out of control into mass violence, despite King not preferring that course. Other people like, Stokely Carmichael and Malcolm X, were all right with that course and thought that, that was the best way to defend black rights, is not to just try to, be assimilated into white society and be fine with that, but actually fight for your rights to the death if necessary. And, this could spiral out of control in the same way. I'm hoping not. I'm hoping we can take the lesson of, say, Pearl Harbor, when the Japanese bombed the United States. And because of that, Franklin Delano Roosevelt just gathered up people of Japanese ancestry and Italian ancestry and a few of German ancestry and placed them in concentration camps. Well, we don't want to see that kind of system, that kind of process follow a murder like this. And I worry, based on some of the responses from prominent people, that it could spiral into that. If that is the propaganda, if the state latches onto this propaganda and uses it as a catalyst for that and justifies it, it's not a kooky conspiracy theory. We saw them do this during 9/11. We saw them doing this during the COVID regime, where it was us versus them, the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. And because the unvaccinated are here, we need to violate their rights. Their most basic rights must be stripped from them because they are causing this catastrophe. I worry that the same thing could happen here, but I hope not. But I did like to hear Tucker Carlson's take on it. Largely agree with him. You know, my trepidations are much the same. Violence should not be more of a part of our discourse and our political climate than it is now. But let me know what you think down below. Do you agree with Tucker Carlson? Is he right? Do you have any big fears about the governmental response to this? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Megyn Kelly. I appreciated this interview with Tucker. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel. I'll tip my hat to you for that, and in return, I'll give you the gift of being able to access all of my videos that are members only before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.